What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. In this video, we are going to talk about our favorite plays of week one for Draftkings daily fantasy in the NFL in week one. Can't believe we're already here. Feels like this year has taken an eternity for the football season to finally come back to us, but here we are talking fantasy football again. We got football like literally going to be starting in about 12 hours. So I am thrilled, pumped. Sorry for getting this video out so late, but for those of you guys looking for last second DraftKings ideas, just wanted to throw out a few names of the guys that to me seem to be the biggest eye openers on the slate this week. Now, build your lineups as you may. We're just going to go over a few of our favorite targets, values at a tournament level, a cash level, and just kind of come, with a little bit of insight, and then you can build your stacks around what we're throwing at you. So we'll go position by position here, starting with the quarterbacks, and we'll break it down. Again, I got tournament plays here, I've got cash plays, and then, of course, guys that you can start in both. Obviously, with tournaments and GPPs, you're going to want to make sure that you're stacking guys on both sides of the ball, running it back. Obviously, that's going to be huge. So typically with tournaments, we're looking at quarterbacks that are a little bit lower priced than some of the top end guys. I'm really surprised that Kyler Murray is only $6,400 on the week. I think that game between San Francisco could actually be very high scoring, and bringing Kyler Murray in with his ability to also run the ball at $6,400 seems pretty cheap to me. So definitely think he's worthy of a tournament play. Being able to run him back with guys like Christian Kirk and George Kittle could end up being a pretty lucrative stack there. Gardner Minshew is going to have to throw the ball a ton this year in Jacksonville with how terrible that defense is going to be. Expecting Indianapolis to control this one pretty well, so there should be plenty of garbage time there for Minshew. And then Mitch Trubisky, he's been in the Millie Maker before. He historically plays really well against Detroit, has actually thrown, I believe, the last couple games that he's played against Detroit, he's thrown 3 touchdowns in each contest. And I mean, when we talk about Mitch Trubisky, I don't think he's a great quarterback by any means, but the fact that they are paying Nick Foles $20 million and Mitch Trubisky still came into Chicago and beat him out and won that job, clearly they see something in him. He's had to have taken some sort of a step forward to be able to beat out the guy that they're paying far more just to sit on the bench. So let's see what we've got with David Montgomery hurt, with basically the whole entire offensive running back core for the Lions hurt. This should be a pretty pass-happy game. I could see this one actually being a little bit more scoring-friendly than Vegas is expecting it to be. And at $5,400, that's one of the cheapest options on the slate if you're trying to save as much money as you can. Elsewhere, I think quarterback is one of the ones that you can typically get away with going a bit lower. And then obviously you can run it back pretty cheaply as well with guys like Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, and Marvin Jones, TJ Hawkinson on the other side. So I think Mitchell Trubisky has a pretty high chance of being in the Millie Maker lineup this week. All right, and then in our cash plays, the reason why we have these guys here is not as many guys we would want to stack for tournaments, but I think Cam Newton's floor is pretty safe, coming at $6,100. That's a pretty decent play there. You can still run it back with a guy like James White. There's just not enough stack potential for me in this Patriots-Dolphins game for me to recommend him in a tournament play. But I think Cam Newton could be one of the better quarterbacks this week. And then Teddy Bridgewater, some of the same concept there. You might be able to stack him with DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey, but that feels like more of a cash game play to me. And then obviously when we're looking at guys you can play in either cash or tournaments, most likely more for tournaments for these guys. But Lamar Jackson, I mean, last year was pretty much the answer every single week in DFS. From what we hear, he looks even better than he did last year. I don't know what that's going to translate into, but one thing to note, looking back all the way to the lockout situation, which was the last time that we had a lack of training camp, a lack of true preseason where there was a lot less tackling going on. And tackling is a skill that is acquired through repetition, and it's forgotten. I don't want to say like people forget how to tackle, but it becomes easier to do the more that they do it. And the fact that, with training camp and no preseason, there's been a lot less physicality on defense. I expect there to be a lot more sloppy play in terms of like defenders being able to tackle guys in these first couple weeks. So offenses should definitely have an advantage heading into the week 1 season here, with defenses just kind of being a little bit rusty. So when you look at potential players that are going to benefit the most, it's going to be guys that are really hard to bring down. And Lamar Jackson by far was the hardest quarterback to take down. Once he runs that ball, he's so quick and elusive in the open field. I think the Browns are going to really struggle tomorrow to keep Lamar Jackson from killing them on all aspects of the ball. So Lamar Jackson, although the most expensive option, could very, very easily be well worth that price of admission. And then Russell Wilson and Matt Ryan. I think this is probably my favorite game this week. There's probably going to be a lot of high ownership here, but if you're playing in smaller tournaments or you just want to take a shot at what should be the most exciting game on the week, Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, I like both of them. It just depends on how you want to go with your stack. You save a little money with Matt Ryan, but I think Russell Wilson has a little bit more upside. If they let Russ cook, this is going to be the only week on the season that you're going to see Russell Wilson this cheap. And even though $7,000 isn't cheap, I still think that there's plenty of room for that price to go up if Wilson actually gets a chance to play like you should be able to play every single week. Okay, let's jump over to the running backs then. So tournament play here, and I guess I could theoretically see a situation where you would put Austin Ekeler into your cast lineup also, but Austin Ekeler is a pretty decent tournament play. He's kind of going under the radar right now. A lot of people are looking at, some of the cheaper guys like Boston Scott, and when they're looking at other guys in this price point, they're looking at Aaron Jones, who I really like a lot this week, but Austin Ekeler is, he has a few unknowns about him based on how much is he going to get used with Tyrod Taylor there now that Melvin Gordon is gone, but Joshua Kelly's coming in. What does this offense look like? And I feel like you're going to have a better shot at throwing Austin Ekeler into your lineup in tournaments because his ownership should be a bit lower than a guy like Dalvin Cook or Josh Jacobs. And then 2 just dart throws that are probably going to be decently low ownership and are very cheap, allowing you to sneak in some higher priced stacks. If you're looking at Jerrick McKinnon and Antonio Gibson. So Jerrick McKinnon with Tevin Coleman likely to sit out. I mean, I don't really know if I should say likely. Right now, he hadn't been practicing because of the smoke levels there in San Francisco, and we're still waiting to even see if that game happens tomorrow. It sounds like even if it doesn't, they'll at least postpone it and it will still happen this week. But Tevin Coleman, with the having sickle cell trait, he was not even practicing when the smoke levels were still at a safe level, but they didn't want to risk it with him. And basically Kyle Shanahan came out and said, Tevin Coleman can sit this game out if he wants to. That's his call. So Jerrick McKinnon could actually see a decent amount of workload. I still think Raheem Mostert will be the running back to own. But again, we're looking for guys with, hidden upside here in tournaments. I think Jerrick McKinnon and $4,000 is a pretty decent shot. And then Antonio Gibson, we have no idea what his role is at this point. He could end up being a massive play, especially if they only roll out 2 or 3 running backs there in Washington. I think this is going to be a decently high-scoring game. Antonio Gibson could be a really decent tournament play. In cash, I mean, this is chalk. Dalvin Cook is a fantastic running back. He torched the Green Bay Packers in Week 2 last year when they played. He was hurt in Week 16, so we didn't get to see what he did in Minnesota. But after getting that contract, they're going to use him heavily, and he is the focal point of that offense. So Dalvin Cook is a great play this week. Josh Jacobs going against Carolina, arguably the worst defense all around, but especially against the run. Carolina Panthers are terrible on defense. Josh Jacobs is absolutely going to smash tomorrow. He's going to be highly owned, but I think you're going to regret it if he's not in your lineup. And then Boston Scott, with Miles Sanders being declared out, nursing that hamstring injury, Boston Scott is going to be very highly owned this week. But in terms of a cash play at $4,800, being able to sneak in some of those higher end receivers by jumping down to Boston Scott, I feel is going to be a very lucrative strategy for you in cash. All right, and then in terms of guys that are playing both cash and tournaments, I mean, of course, Christian McCaffrey, only $10,000. I think he had crept up to close to $12,000 last year. So can he continue what he was doing last year, averaging over 30, 40 fantasy points a week? I mean, against the Raiders, who don't have a very strong defense, and playing with Teddy Bridgewater, who's going to be throwing to him and DJ Moore a lot, I like Christian McCaffrey at $10,000 a ton this week. Aaron Jones absolutely destroyed the Vikings last year. We're hoping he can continue that trend here against Minnesota in week 1. And then Marlon Mack is a guy that's probably being forgotten about a little bit with a lot of other exciting names out there. Marlon Mack is going to eat. Jacksonville has no defensive line to speak of anymore after shipping out all of their big name guys. So Marlon Mack is most likely going to have a very solid fantasy week tomorrow and should be in your lineups in all formats. Okay, looking at the receivers here, DJ Chark in that game versus Indy, as we mentioned with Gardner Minshew, there should be a lot of garbage time. DJ Chark is going to be the most heavily targeted receiver there and could have a ton of garbage time points. Someone that you can get for $6,300. And if you're throwing Minshew out there in your tournament lineup, make sure you're stacking him with Chark. Odell Beckham, with Jarvis Landry still nursing that hip injury, I think Odell Beckham is going to be the main target for Baker Mayfield for a good period of time. And although playing against Baltimore is a tough matchup, I think Baltimore is going to put up a lot of points pretty early on, which means the Browns are going to have to try to fight back. And I think they do that with a potential for Odell Beckham to break a long touchdown at any time. He's always going to be a decent tournament play, and he's incredibly cheap for someone of his caliber. And then Parris Campbell is a very cheap dart throw I'd throw out there going against a weak Jacksonville defense. You know, if the Colts end up having to throw the ball more than we're expecting, like if Gardner Minshew is able to put up some points early on, Parris Campbell is going at an incredibly low price. And based on what we've heard of his rapport with Phillip Rivers in camp, Parris Campbell could be, you know, arguably just as valuable as T.Y. Hilton, especially this week at $3,900. That is a wonderful shot at your wide receiver 3 to give you some more money to build up elsewhere. In cash, of course, we've got Davante Adams, Jamison Crowder. Both of these guys are going to get tremendous volume. Last year, Jamison Crowder had 17 targets versus Buffalo in week 1. Everyone else around Jamison Crowder is basically hurt at this point, so he's going to feast tomorrow. Davante Adams, we know, is historically really good against the Vikings, and you know, while they did lose a lot of big names in the secondary, we'll see. You know, hold my breath to see how good the Vikings defense actually is, but Davante Adams is going to absolutely crush it tomorrow. And then Hunter Renfrow is a less sexy name, but a guy that will probably see a good bit of volume tomorrow with Tyrell Williams out for the year and Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards both coming in as rookies. Hunter Renfrow should see the majority of the targets there at the receiver spot, at least for a couple of weeks. And then Marvin Jones, with Kenny Golladay not playing tomorrow, Marvin Jones is an absolute lock in all formats. He's going to be highly involved in the game tomorrow, and for only $5,500, should finish much further ahead of what you're paying for him. Marquise Brown, I mean, we saw what he did in limited workload last year, coming out and scoring a massive fantasy week in week 1. I think he does that again here. The Cleveland secondary is completely beat up right now. They're running second stringers all over the place. And with Marquise Brown bulking up over the offseason, looking tremendous in camp, Marquise Brown should be one of the highest owned guys on the week. So that would be the only reason why I might pivot off of him, because at this point he's probably pretty close to being one of the chalkiest plays. But his upside is so tremendous. If you are starting Lamar Jackson, you need to stack him with Marquise Brown. And then same thing with DeSean Jackson, pretty similar thing here. A lot of people are going to be starting him, but we saw what he did to Washington last year in week 1, and this is the same scenario here. He's healthy. He's looking good. Jalen Reagor is hurt. Alshon Jeffrey is gone. Miles Sanders is not there. So this is going to be a wheels up situation for DeSean Jackson to cook in week 1, and at only $4,900, you got to jam him into your lineup. All right, looking at the tight ends here. Now, George Kittle is a guy I threw in here in case you are trying to do some stacks in that Arizona 49ers game. I think George Kittle could vastly outperform every other tight end on the slate. Arizona was absolutely atrocious against the tight end last year, and George Kittle is effectively the only real named guy here, with Brandon Ayuk dealing with a hamstring injury, with Deebo Samuel on short-term IR. George Kittle is going to absolutely eat, and playing against Arizona in week 1 is a tremendous way to start the season off. So I think George Kittle definitely has a chance at, putting up 30 DraftKings fantasy points. And I don't think that's hyperbole at all. Rob Gronkowski, same kind of situation here with Mike Evans looking like he's going to go now after the report that he was doubtful yesterday. He was upgraded to questionable today, and then we get a report that it looks like he's going to give it a go. But my bet is Mike Evans is going to be used as more of a decoy than anything. And, what we were hoping for with Mike Evans, that he would get a bunch of touchdowns tomorrow. Well, I think that just shifts over to thinking Rob Gronkowski is going to be the main target in the end zone at only $4,900. If you're trying to throw some stacks out in that Saints Buccaneers game, I think Rob Gronkowski is a pretty decent guy to add to your lineup. And then Logan Thomas, if you're looking for an absolute dart throw, has been looking really sharp in camp. It's not like Washington has that many pass catchers outside of Terry McLaurin. Logan Thomas could end up getting some sneaky upside here, and only $2,800 gives you a lot of wiggle room on the rest of your lineup. All right, in cash, these aren't guys that I'm going to be heavily rostering, but guys that I think we all can say have a pretty safe floor and a decently high ceiling this week. Zach Ertz against Washington with some of the injuries that we've already mentioned up to this point. Hunter Henry, same thing with Los Angeles. We've got Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, Austin Ekeler, and pretty much no one else involved in that passing game. Yes, it will be a lower volume pass offense, but I think Hunter Henry is going to have a pretty decent week one. And then Hayden Hurst in that shootout game. If you're looking for just an extra stack to throw into that Seattle-Atlanta game, I think Hayden Hurst is going to come out and have a pretty good week and has a really high chance at scoring at least one touchdown this week. All right, and then guys that we're trying to jam into our lineups everywhere. If you're stacking Lamar Jackson, you have to do it with Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews absolutely torched the Browns last year, and we're looking for him to do the exact same thing again this year. $6,000 is a little expensive for a tight end. It's going to cause you to get a little bit creative elsewhere in your lineup, but I think Mark Andrews is going to be well worth it by the end of the day. TJ Hawkinson is going to see a bit more work with Kenny Golladay out, and at only $4,200. Let's see if the breakout happens in week one. Definitely worth a shot. And then Chris Herndon, some of the same arguments that we made for Jamison Crowder, is going to see a ton of volume. Yes, Buffalo has been decent against the tight end, but I don't think it's going to affect him too much with Jamison Crowder and Chris Herndon basically being the only guys in town. Buffalo likely to, command this game from the very start. There's going to be a lot of catch-up play for Sam Darnold to have to make in this game, and I think Jamison Crowder and Chris Herndon on volume alone have a pretty decent fantasy game, and only $3,300, you got to jam them into your lineup. Okay, and then arguably one of the more overlooked, but definitely one of the most important pieces to get right if you want to have a shot at some of those bigger tournament plays is the defense. So here are some of our favorite picks this week. Obviously, the Bills at the top of the slate at $3,700. Not expecting the Jets to be putting up any type of prolific passing numbers here. So the Bills definitely have a shot at putting up a ton of fantasy points, especially if they are able to score defensively. The Patriots last year, we saw absolutely destroyed the first half of the season. Yes, they did lose some key pieces to people opting out, but I'm not that scared of Miami right now with Devontae Parker nursing an injury. Preston Williams coming back from an ACL might take him a little bit to get reacclimated. That run game is anything far from certain. And then Mike Gesicki off the injury report, but we'll see how much of a factor he is in this game. I really like the Patriots a lot this week. I think they could end up being the highest scoring defense by far. Colts as well, another team that I really like. I guess the nervous part here is in garbage time, does Gardner Minshew end up putting up a lot of points and lowering your ceiling, but I think the Colts should have plenty of opportunity to get some sacks, get some defensive points by cause turnovers, and overall the Colts and Patriots are probably my two favorite plays this week. The Chargers at Cincinnati, another decent play here, although I don't feel it has as much upside as the Colts or the Patriots do going against Joe Burrow in his season opener. And then the Jets, if you're looking for an absolute bottom barrel play, I don't think Buffalo's going to have to do too much on offense to win this game. So the Jets might end up being a decent defense play if you're trying to save that $1,000 or $1,500 to get that cheap defense. But that is it, guys, for week 1 in terms of our daily fantasy values and tips and targets. These are up on our website as well. Our goal would be to post this up on Friday every week to give you guys a little bit more time to get those into your lineups, but trying to get everything established this week. So I appreciate your patience. Thank you guys for joining me. Thoughts on Washington defense at a minimum price? I think the Eagles are still going to put up plenty of points tomorrow. I would rather play the Jets. If you can find a way to sneak $100 more, I think the Jets give you a little more upside than Washington does. It's probably not the worst play, I guess, with that defensive line there with Chase Young coming in and all the Eagles' offensive line woes. Might be able to get some sacks, but overall, I think the Eagles are going to put up a lot more points than the Bills will. And for only $100, I'm probably not going to pivot down to Washington. But hey, hit me up in the comment section if you guys have any other questions. Thank you guys for joining us. Good luck to you this week, and we will see you on the other side.